And so now it's my pleasure to give the floor to our fabulous MP. The reason the EDAs exist is to support their hopefully elected representative. Not everybody gets to be so lucky to have an elected representative. We are. And I really appreciate the many years of work Elizabeth has put in. And like I say, I could hardly keep up with her during the election campaign. And she was working on a bum knee.
And now I'm working on a new bum knee.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. So take it away, Elizabeth.
okay, thanks, Dan. I want to start really picking up where Mike left off because Mike's done an extraordinary job in a very short period of time in getting known by a lot of other MPs and impressing them. It doesn't surprise any of you who are here now. If you didn't know Mike before, I'm seeing the comments in the chat. Mike, people know, okay, he's impressive. Now we see why he got elected. He's impressive. I love working with Mike, but I have to say, just recently, I was reaching out to one of the MPs with whom I'm working on a specific issue that's in her riding. There's a really quite damaging European iron ore mine in Nunavut called Baffinland. Doesn't get much media attention. You may have noticed in the middle of last winter that some Inuit hunters were camping out in the middle of winter in Nunavut on an airstrip to get the Baffinland mine to start paying attention to the environmental damage they were doing. So we've been working on it for a while, and the current member of parliament for Nunavut is a fantastic woman and Inuk and a lawyer named Laurie Idlut. And Laurie was the lawyer for the hunters and the trappers. So I started working with her before she became an MP. And I called her we had a phone meeting, I guess, last week. And she's terrific. By the way, I mean, people's lives, Mike's right, I probably know more about the personal lives of every MP than anybody else because the other MPs only pay attention to the people in their own caucus. And I try to get to know everybody. But Laurie spent Christmas in isolation with COVID. She couldn't see her husband. She was completely alone through all of it. Anyway, she made a point of saying to me, oh, and I'm so impressed with Mike. Mike Morrice is a good ally to us. We hear him speaking. I've talked to him, so that that kind of to chip away at 338 MPs and have them know you after only a coming. And of course, the virtual parliament makes it even harder. So I do stand when I can be in parliament in person. This is how you get the speaker to notice you. Honestly, I can spend basically on average 2 hours of standing up every 15 minutes to try to get a question in. And my average is out of every 2 hours, I get one question. But you're up and down. I mean, it's good for me because I'm an Anglican, so I know the getting up and down. You get up and down, you're on your knees, you're standing up. Anyway, those of you who know different religions based on Robin Williams, who was an Anglican, used to say he did it for the calisthenics. But anyway, you're up and down. That's what you do in Parliament to get to be heard. I've got the sun right now. I hope it's not too weird. I have to stay in certain positions for my knee. I had the second knee operated on mid-December. So that walker, which thank you, Sheila Levy, for lending it to me, that walker's really put on the miles. Mike was, of course, working with me at COP26. And the walker was on and off the trains and on and off. And oh, my heavens. So that walker, I don't know, Sheila, if I ever get it back to you, if it's going to be running, but it's a godsend. So I also want to start by acknowledging a lot of the people in this virtual space, because this is pretty cool. And when I look back over the time, and just like Mike, because I was in an NGO, I didn't want anyone to know what party I supported. I didn't join the Green Party till I was 52. But looking around in this space, there's somebody here who was on Green Party staff when I ran for leader in 2006. And that's Derek Pinto, who now lives in our neck of the wood. He was in the Green Party communication staff way back then. I know that there's some of the folks here from Saanich Gulf Islands who were already active in the SGI Greens way back when. So I'm pretty sure that Jack Thornburg, I'm pretty sure that you were involved in the SGI Greens even before I stood up to run for leader. I'm pretty sure that Andrew Loveridge has been from Galliano, has been in the SGI Greens for that long as well. And looking through the attendees here, we have a number of the people who laid the groundwork for the great work Dan Kells is now doing. So former chairs of our EDA, pretty sure, Jack, you were head of the CEO of the EDA in one period. Certainly Dave Charles was, and he did an amazing job. Certainly Harold Hummel. I hope I'm not forgetting anyone who was actually the CEO of an EDA, of our EDA. But I also know that in our Zoom today, my former co-campaign managers, Marilyn Redivo and Jocelyn Gifford, you can never say enough to thank Jocelyn for her work. And Marilyn keeps on going and played a key role in the 2021 campaign too. So there's amazing dedication in this space within Saanich Gulf Islands and also right across Canada. The furthest East Coast person I think here is John Rice from the Southwest New Brunswick EDA. But we've got people, I don't want to forget Carolyn Herbert, because Carolyn is living in Ottawa now, but she was a canvasser in the 2011 campaign when she lived in Saanich Gulf Islands. So some of you will remember, and all of us, I mean, we've become friends and family so very much from working in so many campaigns. I also wanted to go back and just say that in 2006, when I ran for leader, I'm quite sure Bob Bosson was very sure he was never going to vote Green, just saying. So I celebrate those people who are Green a long time, and maybe I celebrate even more those who finally saw the light and traded in their orange T-shirt for a green one. So this has been, because I've been a fan of Bob Bosson since when he was always on with Peter Zosky and the string band and the Bob Bosson a tonic to cure nuclear war. I'm sure I've got that wrong, Bob. I probably messed that up. You can put it in the chat. But there's also a lot of people on this call from within the Zoom, from within Saanich Gulf Islands, representing our geographical space that includes a lot of Salt Spring Islanders who are on this call today. At least one from Pender, Krista Grace Warwick, and Andrew from Galliano. We've got good representation. No surprise, Salt Spring Island is going to win here because there's Marguerite and there's Sue and there's Victoria and there's a lot of Jan Slakoff. I'm not sure where you're living these days because I know you're planning to move someplace, but we're sure going to hate it if you have to move away from Saanich Gulf Islands. But we have, and Steve Abbott from SGF from Salt Spring. We have a tremendous team that is throughout the riding and also across the country. And that's one of the reasons, Mike, that we've got 83 people, quite honestly. We also have North Island Powell River here on the call. So it's more than the geographical bound. And Bob, of course, is Nanaimo Ladysmith living on Gabriola. So we have a tremendous family of Greens across the country. Sometimes one would say, as in many families, a little dysfunctional, but we've turned the corner on that. And I'm hugely grateful, as I think all of you will know, hugely grateful to Amita Kuttner for stepping up to take on interim leadership. I think they're doing an amazing, amazing job, just as the wonderful council. The Vice President English on council, I think all of you will know, Lisa Gunderson lives quite near us at Esquimalt Saanich Suk. And Lorraine Rekmans, we mentioned, but you can't thank her enough. Clément Badra, Vice President French, who was also with Mike and me in Glasgow. And Clément doesn't mind, sharing that he's in a wheelchair. He's a really remarkable, brilliant young man who's been a Green Party candidate many times in Quebec, and who was also through. This is something I will share with my family and friends here on the call. The one thing, without a doubt, that I have in common with Annemie Paul was her leadership was the worst year of my life, and in the worst of it, Clément Badra was an intern in Jenica's office. So we lived through some really tough times together. So I'm enormously grateful for our new council that Clément Badra and Lisa Gunderson and Lorraine Rekmans and Carrie McLaren, who's from Vancouver, all work so hard. I meant to mention someone else from Vancouver on this call. Bridget Burns is our BC organizer. who was also our candidate in 2019 running in East Vancouver, and who did a great job supporting the candidate this time around, a fantastic Indigenous candidate in East Van, Cheryl Matthews. And Alison Lamb, so great to have you part of the team as a CEO. I mean, I will stop acknowledging everybody because there's 83 of you and you're all fantastic. And I'm so grateful to you all for being here and super grateful for having youth. And Helena has stepped up to be on our executive. And it's a tough job to try. You can look around the room and you can figure that some of us are kind of in the same demographic and it ain't youth. So we got to do a good job in making sure we engage and are welcoming and inclusive around all issues of diversity and inclusion. And that's always a question of stopping and checking yourself and saying, okay, what more can we do to make this space welcoming? I just wanted to reflect on the challenges for this year. I have been so impressed and inspired these last few weeks because we decided to work together on a shared Green Party position in response to the request for public consultation around the emissions reduction strategy for Canada. Now, coming out of COP26, and there were 4 of us Canadian Greens who attended actively. Obviously, Mike and I were on the government delegation. My husband, John Kidder, came, as did Clément Badra, with credentials from the Global Greens. Diane Sachs, the deputy leader of the Green Party of Ontario, was going to come. She had credentials from Global Greens and then had a reason she had to cancel. But Mike managed to organize it and speak on behalf of Diane Sachs in a side event with Diane joining by Zoom. So Global Greens had a tremendous impact at COP26. In fact, of the 9 countries' ministers who were negotiating at COP were Green Party members. You don't always notice it, right? How would you know that Eamon King, the Green Party, the climate minister for Ireland, co-leader of the Irish Greens, right? The climate minister for New Zealand, James Shaw, co-leader of New Zealand Greens. And that's a remarkable story because, of course, New Zealand has proportional representation. And it was in 2017 that James Shaw and the New Zealand Greens managed to put Jacinda Ardern in power in a shared, same as we had in BC until John Horgan broke his word. And well, we won't go on about John Horgan. I don't want to depress people, but there's a confidence and supply agreement was used in New Zealand. And in the confidence and supply agreement, not a coalition government, they actually had 4 Greens in cabinet with Jacinda Ardern. And then, as you all know, even under mixed member proportional, people say, well, once you have MMP, you'll never get a majority government, and that will be bad. Well, Jacinda Ardern, no surprise, won a massive majority government. The surprise was, without any need for any other party to prop them up as New Zealand Labour, and also having to bypass her own MPs, she put 2 Greens in her cabinet. And I think it's because she knew you don't replace a James Shaw that easily. He knows the science on climate change. He's a math guy. He also wanted to be Minister of Statistics. Anyway, James Shaw, as Minister of Climate for New Zealand, when the media covers and quotes what James Shaw said in closing plenary, they don't have a bracket that says this was the Green Party guy. Now with the newly constructed government in Germany, there are now 10 ministers around the world who are climate ministers who are Greens. By the way, there are the 2 co-leaders of the Scotland Green Party are in cabinet, but neither one of them are the Minister for Climate or Environment. So they're not negotiating in COPs. But it makes a big difference. And that's why when Mike was saying 4, if we hadn't had bad luck, and I'll just put it down to bad luck and not say more than that, we should have had 12 elected this time. What I thought in my head, my succession plan was that all the wonderful people who were running for leader last time would all run in their own seats and get elected. So we had a team of strong, and of course, since the record that we had as Greens until this year was that no one who was elected as a Green anywhere in Canada had ever failed to win re-election. So that's a horrible record to have beaten. And it kills me to this day that Paul Manley isn't the member of Parliament for Nanaimo Ladysmith. It will kill me until he's elected again as the Member of Parliament for Nanaimo Ladysmith, because Paul Melly is one of the most impressive MPs who's ever served. He did amazing work, and his team was so strong and so amazing. And he should be back with us in Parliament. It's obviously, sad that we didn't get those 12 seats, but we have to, because one of the reasons I have to work so hard and Mike has to work so hard to get any chance to say anything is that we're not one of these so-called recognized parties. No other country in the world operating under Westminster parliamentary democracy has this nonsense that you have to have a certain number of MPs elected or MLAs elected before you have the same rights as everybody else. Everybody else understands that in representative democracy, all MPs are equal because our constituents are equal. So our ridings are equal. So how come we have this George Orwell Animal Farm system? We're equal, except some are more equal than others. And that's what the Conservatives and the Liberals and the NDP and the Bloc have now. But, in the time that I've been involved sort of politically, I'm not as a member of a party, but I mean, I remember when the Conservatives went down to 2 seats, remember? It was Jean Charest and Elsie Wayne. And, at that time, a famous Conservative once went into a restaurant in Kingston to get a table, and they looked up at him and said, "Oh, party of 2." So, I mean, it happens. And in the 1993 election, the NDP went down to 9 seats. And they were plenty angry that they didn't get the same rights in question period, and they didn't get the money. That's the big thing, right? Is the recognized parties, so-called. They passed a law in 1963 to say that the bigger parties needed more help. What is that about? The bigger parties need more help. It's back to Mike's point about the door-to-door. The Liberals don't have the resources of the Greens. So what they did in 1963 is they passed a law that said, if you have more than 12 MPs, the public funds of the people of Canada are going to give you money so that you can have a research office in Parliament that the public pays for. It comes to over $1 million a year in freebies to the bigger parties. And the more MPs they have, the more money they get. So that's how, the leader gets a top up and the deputy leaders get, and if you're a speaker, if you're a whip or an assistant whip or whatever, the money gets added on and larded on. But the bill was about money in 1963. And then as a matter of tradition, they just started adding in, oh yeah, those unrecognized party MPs, they don't get to sit on committees. And that wasn't in the bill that was passed in 1963. They just, bad habits in this parliament, in the Parliament of Canada, bad habits become traditions, become accepted conventions, and then it's like it's a rule. So MPs like Mike and me, we won't be allowed to sit on any committees. But like yesterday, I was on the Finance Committee for 3 hours from 8 a.m. here till 11 a.m. And in the course of 3 hours, by using my begging bowl amounts to writing personal emails to everybody around the table to say, I really want to ask a question of the CMHC rep. 2 minutes would be enough. Can I please? So I got Heath McDonald from PEI gave me 2.5 minutes, and Gabrielle Sainte-Marie from the Bloc Québécois gave me 2.5 minutes. So out of 3 hours, I got 5 minutes on the record of questions. It shouldn't be like this. This is not Westminster parliamentary democracy. This is a Canadian version with an overlay of overly empowered big political parties to shut us out. So it's a constant struggle. But I'm so glad Mike is there with me. I wanted to get back to Dan's point with his suggestion that I might be the longest serving Green MP. I know for sure no, because speaking of Westminster parliamentary democracy, the first Green to ever win a seat in Westminster parliamentary, in a first past the post country with his Westminster parliamentary democracy was, of course, Carolyn Lucas. And dear Carolyn, Carolyn is still the only Green MP in the Parliament of Westminster. So while people may beat up on us in Canada and say, well, you're never really going to get very far, and you've been an MP for 10 years and you still, right now they're writing us off the map, right? If you look at Power and Politics or Power Play and the opening sequence, for the last 5, 6, 10 years, they've always been a green slide. It's been, we've been in the mix of what you look at for parties. They're trying to write us out as if we don't exist anymore. And we have to keep proving that we do. We shouldn't have to do that. But poor Carolyn. I mean, she was replaced by Natalie Bennett as leader. Natalie didn't win her seat. Natalie stepped down. Then they went to co-leaders, and Carolyn stepped back up to be co-leader. And then she stepped out, so there'd be a new co-leader. But all of these elections over and over again, I mean, the Greens in the UK stopped Theresa May from winning a majority by voluntarily stepping back in a number of ridings where if a Green had run, the Conservative would have won the riding. So they did that deliberately in that election. And one article in The Guardian commentator said, if we want to know who we can thank that the Conservatives under Theresa May did not win a majority. By the way, I'm not related to her. You know, I know these things, so not related to her. But ran into her in Glasgow. I passed this far away from her in the hallway. I nearly ran her over with my walker. So she's a tinier person than you would think. I think I could have run her over with my walker. But anyway, sort of as people go by, I go, oh, wasn't that? Anyway, Karen Lucas is one of my favorite friends in the world. And it's a heartbreaker. We had a Zoom meeting after COP to compare notes. And there were about 20 Greens in the room in a cottage somewhere in England. And we were connected with David Wallace Wells, the American writer who writes for New Yorker, and connecting in with Bill McGibbon, although Bill had to drop off because they lost power in Vermont. Anyway, Carolyn was heartbroken and saying to people, I don't know whether the work I'm doing in Parliament makes any difference. And I found myself having to cheer her up and say, Carolyn, if you weren't there, the horror of it, the UK Parliament has more than 600 MPs. Imagine, Mike and I only have to compete for space with 336 others. Carolyn's there by herself all these years later. And when she did that, when the Greens in the UK, the actual name of the party is the Greens of England and Wales, because there's also separate Green Party of Scotland and a separate Green Party of Ireland. So United Kingdom has separate little, bits of islands, just like us. But I said, Carolyn, if you hadn't been there all these years, who would have been telling the truth about anything? She plays a remarkable role all by herself all these years later. And by the time I finished cheering her up, I'd cheered myself up, and everybody was cheering for electing Greens at this little cottage in somewhere in the UK. But the Greens of England and Wales, when they made this self-sacrificial move to make sure that the UK wasn't governed by a majority Conservative government, what did the nasty, rotten Labour Party under Jeremy Corbyn do? Well, the Lib Dems, by the way, didn't run against Carolyn in Brighton Pavilion. And they didn't run against Molly Scott Cato, which was our best chance to win a second seat, because Molly Scott Cato had been a member of the European Parliament. So that's a leg up. When UK was part of the European Union, you had people elected who were Greens, who were serving in the European Parliament. So they were known as good parliamentarians. Molly Scott Cato, from a member for the European Parliament, had the best shot to win next to Carolyn in Bristol. So the Lib Dems didn't run against Molly Scott Cato. Labour ran hard to defeat Carolyn Lucas in Brighton Pavilion and to defeat Molly Scott Cato. This is the same problem we have with the NDP, and it's entirely due to first past the post. If we didn't have a system that rewards nastiness, rewards toxicity, and punishes cooperation, we'd be so much farther ahead, because the culture of politics changes when you change the voting system. And that's the one thing I wanted to end on, is the change that happens. It's empirical. You can measure it. And we know from our colleagues in New Zealand that it's real, because they had a system just like us, Westminster parliamentary democracy under first past the post. And in the mid-90s, they changed to mixed member proportional. And that's why it was possible for James Shaw and Jacinda Ardern to announce ahead of the election in 2017, we'll work together. And after the election, if you vote for Greens and you vote for Labour, however you choose to vote, don't worry. We're going to work together. I mean, you can't imagine an Instagram post of Jagmeet Singh and me in his lovely rocker. And we're not together in his rocker. It's not going to happen. He's, never mind about rocker joke. He's off his rocker. But anyway, he will do anything to kill Greens. We know that. Saanich Gulf Islands twice has received special note of smear campaigns through all of our mail slots. Is that because Jagmeet Singh is a really nasty guy? No, it's the voting system. The voting system informs the NDP that it's really important to wipe Greens off the map. It's more important, like in the 2019 election, I loved Cheryl Hardcastle. She was an NDP member of parliament in Hamilton. That's an NDP seat forever. Joe Comartin had held it. Cheryl Hardcastle should have been reelected. There was a wonderful NDP member from Saskatoon. I mean, there were a lot of really good friends of mine who were defeated because Jagmeet Singh and his brain trust running their campaign decided it's way more important to try to wipe Greens off the map than to put resources into reelecting our MPs in Quebec or in Hamilton or in Saskatoon, because Greens are a threat to us and we have to wipe them off the map. That's why they lie, and that's why they use nasty smear campaigns. It's not that they're bad people. They're informed by the strategy of a winner-take-all system that's inherently divisive and rewards nastiness and punishes cooperation. So I know this is one of Bob Mackay's favorite of my golden oldies in the song sheet. We have to keep working to get rid of first past the post, because it's an obstacle to climate action. It's an obstacle to cooperation. And when we look at a minority parliament that we have now, if the NDP cared about climate, they would be able, as from 2019 till the 2021 election, they never made climate anything of a condition before giving the Liberals the support that they would need to get majority vote on the things they care about. And the ultimate of it, of course, was Bill C-12, where the NDP did a deal with the Liberals to promise to defeat all Green amendments to the Climate Accountability Act. So the Climate Accountability Act, as I just mentioned, was a wonderful experience of teamwork within the Green Party. We really have turned a corner. The shadow cabinet that was fired, well, all of us as members of shadow cabinet in fall of 2020 were told we weren't needed, and the leader was going to have a very interesting process of recruiting a new shadow cabinet. Can't say that it isn't a terrific shadow cabinet, but the teamwork is that shadow cabinet that was announced last summer. Our new interim leader, Amita, has kept all of those people. There's no en masse firing of the shadow cabinet. All of the people appointed by the last leader are on the shadow cabinet. Plus, Mike Morrice and I have been named to the shadow cabinet. So we're all working together. And our interim leader and shadow cabinet members and Mike and I were able all together to sign a 15-page letter to Stephen Guilbeault that describes what really needs to be done. I'm going to include the link to it in Good Sunday Morning tomorrow, but you can find it online on the Green Party website. There's a thrill. Something that we've actually worked on in Parliament is being mentioned on the Green Party website. So much is improving every single day. And I'm hopeful that when the next leadership race takes place, that we take a cold, hard look at the mistakes of the last leadership race. And I would put to all of you who watch those debates, we don't need to see a bunch of Greens asked, what are your opinions on guaranteed livable income? What do you think about pharmacare? Do you think you're going to find a Green who's against it? Why are we asking these dumb questions of people running for leadership? When I ran for leadership in 2006, the questions I got were, what is your strategy to grow the party? How do you think we're going to get Greens elected? There was a very sharp difference between me and the person who was really, a terrific Green and a front runner when I started running for leader, David Chernyshenko. His answer was, we can't really realistically expect to elect anyone in less than 10 years. And as leader, I'll spend all my time helping us build EDAs so that by 2016, we'd be in a position to maybe elect someone. And I said, we can elect people now. We just have to act like other real parties. And if there's a by-election and there's a leader without a seat, you run in that by-election. You try to make sure that people know that you're ready to get elected. We compete in the first past the post. We don't say we can't get elected till we get electoral reform. We say, no, we can get elected. We can go out there and do it now. Whether I gave the right answers isn't the point. The point is the questions were the right questions. Can you build a team? Tell us a time in your life when you built a team. Tell us a time when you showed that you could pull people together who didn't agree. How are you at consensus decision making? Do you understand the concept of servant leadership? These are the questions we need to ask in the next leadership race. I'm not part of any of the committee that's going to be figuring out what questions or how the leadership race is organized. It's not in our constitution, right? Every leadership race, you sort of start from scratch and figure out how do we want to run this thing. But that's a live question. Amita is on that team to figure out how should the next leadership race be organized. We know for a fact, because as Lorraine said, it's in the Constitution, the leadership race must start, I think it's May 26th, towards the end of May, exactly 6 months from when interim leader Amita Kuttner was named as interim leader. There must be the beginning of a leadership race. Now, that's not the end of their time as our interim leader. They will continue as interim leader till the leadership race ends. But let's go forward on this and think about, we need to be talking about not several election cycles till we rebuild. We're going to come back strong. And the Conservatives didn't sit there with 2 seats for several elections in a row. No, we're going to come back strong, elect 12 Green MPs, have the kind of leader who knows how to build a team. And I don't know who that person is because I don't know who's going to step up and run for leader. But we need to be running the kind of race that engages all our members and make sure everybody is engaged and wants to participate to build the team, build the shadow cabinet, support the amazing volunteers on federal council. That is the governance of this party under our constitution is federal council. I'll add parenthetically, not the fund. It's really important that we have democracy and grassroots democracy in the way we run our party to show Canadians that we know what it looks like when we show up in Parliament. Grassroots democracy is the only way forward to solve the climate crisis, and it's the only way forward to get guaranteed livable income, and it's the way that Greens are going to not just build a party, which frankly, building a party doesn't interest me at all, but preserving my grandchildren's future. That interests me. And I'm not going anywhere, and I plan to run again in Saanich Gulf Islands whenever the next election comes our way. Thank you all for all your support, and thanks for this terrific AGM.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Always wonderful to hear from you. And I wonder if you'd be willing to take some questions, and perhaps Mike as well.
Yeah, sure.
Mike is still with us. And
Yay.
what I'm going to do is allow people to speak to us rather than mail a question in. So if anybody has a question, you can unmute yourself. And I hope it's working. Okay. Murray Leslie.
Oh, hi there. And Elizabeth, I'm so happy to hear that you are going to run again. I was really, really hoping you would say that in your speech today. So that was the best thing I heard all day. My question is, how do you perceive, or how are we going to work against the media bias against the Green Party?
Well, I just love the new documentary on the Canadian media. I don't know if you've seen it. It's called Don't Look Up.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Kate Blanchett plays Rosie Barton. It's a remarkable documentary. It's really well done. Sorry.
Don't look up.
Yeah, you can't, but I mean, and he is a dear friend of me, really, is former Prime Minister Paul Martin. And he one time wrote, a politician who complains about the media is like a sailor who complains about the sea. We're kind of stuck. So I encourage those reporters who are really serious about doing the right thing. I think Laura Lynch and the new CBC documentary show, What on Earth really helps. The other night I watched CBC. I watched CBC an hour of the National, and this huge chunk of time, and I'm embarrassed that I didn't know the wonderful work, and whose name, the guy I forget already, who was the first Black editor of Vogue who died. Obviously an impressive human being, made a difference in the world of fashion. Then I watched CTV National News for a half an hour, half the time. They also paid tribute to this wonderful editor at Vogue, but they also had a remarkable interview with Roberta Bondar because it was the anniversary of her space flight, and she talked about the climate crisis. And I'm thinking, what's wrong with our national public broadcaster that they so often confuse gossip and celebrity nonsense with? I mean, if I find on average, CTV has better climate coverage and clearer climate coverage than CBC. So one of the things we need to do, not talk about the bias against Greens, because that just sounds like whining, but we do need to encourage our fellow activists to take it on themselves to watch for good coverage and bad coverage of climate or whatever, and use the reader feedback mechanisms to newspapers, read the consumer complaint lines for CBC, and actually complain when we see things are poorly done. Right before going to COP26, I had already gone down to Vancouver to be able to get our flight, so it was really close. We managed to, John and I managed to have only one flight, but I mean, it was the first flight in 13 months, but it killed me to have to fly Vancouver to Heathrow. But once we got there, and Mike and I took the train from down to, and we, by the way, left King's Cross at 11 o'clock to get to Glasgow by 4, got there at 9 p.m. because we had an extreme weather event, windstorm, that knocked the trees down. And we were on an electric train, so the electric lines had branches. And anyway, but when I was in Vancouver and listening to on the car radio, there was the CBC national news, and COP26 will determine whether the world will meet the 2% target. National radio news. Like, I'm losing my mind here. Just like the Jennifer Lawrence character. I want to scream. So I found a phone number of a CBC guy in Toronto and phoned him and said, "You've got to fix that." The national news just went out saying that national CBC, you should be, I mean, it's embarrassing. Make sure that's changed. There's no 2% target. It's 2 degrees Celsius global average temperature increase. I mean, what is 2%? I've heard Rosie Barton do the same thing. 2% target. I didn't know that they're going to meet. What? Basic understanding of some really basic information. If they had a business reporter who didn't know the difference between inflation and deflation, they wouldn't last long. But if you're at CBC or, God help us, the National Post, which has, by the way, a contract with the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers to promote Canadian fossil fuels. Yeah, Wendy, really. Yeah, I know. But we need to be on the case of giving our media in real time feedback. You just goofed up there. Or what a great job. That story was terrific. Briefly, and eventually that'll be fairer coverage for Greens too. Mike, are you jumping in on this?
Well, the other thing we can do is have meaningful campaigns that are worthy of their attention. And I'll use an example. Elizabeth has been amplifying the Canada Disability Benefit that I've been really pushing for. This would lift up 1.5 million Canadians out of poverty, Canadians living with disabilities. Some of you may have already seen it and signed the petition. But I think if as Greens, if we are effective, if we insert ourselves in the conversation the way Elizabeth is so effective at doing, and then speak credibly about the policies that matter to our neighbors, that's going to build the credibility and the relationships. I can see it that Elizabeth, when Heather walked by at COP, she comes over to say, "Hello, this is Heather from the Star," and obviously wants to get a quick word in with Elizabeth. So I think putting ourselves physically in the right places to have the conversation, leading the campaigns that merit their attention, as Greens, having 2 seats in Parliament, having the experts we do on shadow cabinet, having a leader who is so comfortable and really well-spoken and genuine. I think that's also part of it too, is continuing to earn their trust and building that back up too.
And Mike, just because of that petition is so successful, can you unmute yourself again and share the success and the number of people who've signed this is Mike's petition on the House of Commons petition page.
Yeah, it was in partnership with Disability Without Poverty. Some of you might know Al Etmansky and his work. It's a disability-led organization. Almost 18,000 people have signed on. It's the largest signed, if you take away those that are related to vaccinations, after those are the top three, this is the next most signed petition. From my point of view, it's constructive because the Liberals said they're going to do it. There's plenty of things that they say they're going to do that they don't do. To me, if we could give them more attention on the areas where they said they're going to do it, there's a better chance that it's not just effective policy, but it's constructive and that it might actually have it happen sooner than it otherwise would. We've got the attention of the Minister Qualtrough, is seemingly very supportive. And so just one more way to show 89% of Canadians believe, yes, we need a guaranteed livable income. And certainly the place to start is one of the most marginalized groups across the country, those living in poverty at disproportionate rates. It's Canadians living with disabilities. And if we got the legislation started now, it could get passed before the next election. It could get funded in budget 2023. And so this is what I'm going to get upstaged by a dog here. So I'm going to pause here.
This is a pause. I just have to do this for Sheila Levy and John are her other parents, and they haven't seen her for a while because I've been selfish in keeping her to myself. So I just wanted to make sure that Zoe got to say hi to everybody. Sorry, you are getting upstaged by a dog. It's unforgivable, Mike. Nobody but, I'm so sorry.
She's been groomed.
Yeah, she just came back from, she's looking very chic and yet fluffy.
Okay.
And she has a bow. But anyway, never mind.
Well, I'm going to jump in here. It's a couple minutes to 4 o'clock on the coast here, and I know the people back east are probably ready to chow down on dinner, but I want to thank everybody who's come today from coast to coast. This is really fabulous to have visitors here, and we really appreciate you showing up. You're welcome to go to our website and you can find out how to contact us, and we'd love to hear from anybody and everybody on your thoughts about today or whatever. We're open to ideas, and whether you love us or hate us, you can tell us. I really want to thank my executive council. There has been so much work putting this AGM together, and there's been a lot of behind the scenes, and even beyond the executive council, I got to thank Tom Neiman for doing all our web work. Thank you, Tom, and Harold Hommel and Marilyn helping us out with other work that we were doing. And there's lots of little bits and pieces that pulled together to put the show on. Very big thanks to Lorraine and Mike and Elizabeth for speaking to us today. And it's always a learning experience to hear from these people, and I really appreciate it. Thank you, Elizabeth, for keeping our EDA running at the house level. Most appreciated. And thank you, everybody, for showing up today. It's been wonderful. And shout out to all of you fabulous Greens. You're all great. And I love you all. Thank you, Mike.